Hi, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. Now, look, we'll give a minute for people to join us. My name's Angus Pryor. I'm your host today. Special thank you to Centaur, Dental for Web, who's supporting this. Look, can you help me check the chat, please? Would you mind typing into the chat where you are tuning in from? Maybe you can put the town or the city or whatever. It's always fun. Oh, good. Okay, the chat's turning up. That's great. I really love it when people engage because I would. So Melbourne, thank you, Aaron. Kaz is in Bendigo. Sophie's in Sunshine Coast. We were there a few weeks ago. Kath's in Sydney. Where's everybody else? And then I'll tell you where I am. I can see there's quite a few others. Just type into the chat where you're tuning in from. It's always fun to see where people are. So we've got the East Coast represented, Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria. Mohammed's in Sydney. Welcome, Mohammed. Well, I will tell you, in fact, maybe I'll type it into the chat. I doubt anybody's here, but one never knows. Is anybody in Port Macquarie? Because that's where I am at the moment. I've literally just checked into a motel and they let me check in a bit early so I could deliver this webinar. All right, I can see a few others there. Type into the chat where you're located. It's always good fun to see. We've got a couple of Sophies in there. I think it looks like Sophie's in there twice. What about you others? I don't see anything from Anna. Aaron, we've heard from Kaz. We've heard from Gina. Where are you based? Lan, where are you based? Sophie, Suzanne, Yoga, etc. Good names. Gympie. There you go. Queensland. So a couple of Queenslanders. I say Queenslander, that's where you're located. I mean, I was born in Queensland, but I don't live there anymore. Lived all over. All right, I'm going to suggest we get going. Just finally, as you're typing into the chat, can you see my screen, my PowerPoint, please? Would you mind just putting a yes into the chat? Great, thanks. I really appreciate you guys getting on the chat. It really helps me because otherwise I'm sort of presenting to myself sitting in a hotel room, which is okay, but it's more fun when I can chat to you all. Thanks, Sophie. Nice to hear from you. All right, working harder won't grow your practice. Here's what will. My name's Angus Pryor, CEO of Dental Stars and Dental Growth Solutions. Let's get going. So the purpose of this session is to understand why working harder isn't enough. We're going to unpack that because sometimes we think that's the solution. Discover what high-performing practices do differently. Like I've spent a lot of time in dental practice lately. I mean, my career, I've spent a lot of time with dentists, more than 10,000 hours. But specifically recently, you know, I was in a practice this morning. I spoke to a bunch of people last night. We've got a little roadshow going. And then the third part is create a roadmap for 10% growth in the next 6 months. And so the agenda for today is pretty simple, which is we'll do some background. That'll be a little bit about me, a little bit about you. We're going to unpack working harder. Is it the answer? Clearly, I don't think it is because that's the name of this presentation. Then we're going to look at high-performing practice secrets. As I've mentioned, I have worked with hundreds and hundreds of practices, probably thousands. And finally, give you an easier way. But the key, my friends, is I'm going to ask you to type into the chat. Would you mind typing in take action now? Could you type that into the chat, please? Type that in, take action now, and then I'll tell you why I'm getting you to do that. Take action now. We'll see who's got the fastest fingers. Well done, Kath. Hey, Kaz, nice to hear from you, and Gina. The reason we do this is because we're speaking to ourselves, our brains. We're going, take action now. And what it means is we're tuning our brains to look for things that we can implement. Like I'm not just here to sort of entertain you. It's kind of what can I practically do as a result of what we learned today. All right, well, let's get going. So now I know a little about some of you, but if you wouldn't mind, just type into the chat a number that relates to your role. If you're the practice principal, put a 1 in there. If you're an associate dentist, put a 2. If you're a practice manager, put a 3. For everybody else, put a 4. It just helps me to sort of, so mainly practice managers. We've got a couple of others. I have a feeling some of you might be receptionists. Maybe if you put a 4, just put what your role is, please. Just in a word is fine. It just helps me to sort of adjust my presentation when I know who's listening. Okay, Gina's an owner. That's good. Yes, I should have had that. Mohammed's an owner too. Good. Okay. All right. So we actually got quite a good mix today. We've got some owners. We've got some practice managers. We've got some people with other roles. All right. So let's keep going. And then one other question, please. How many chairs do you have in your practice? That always helps me with just trying to get a sense of the size. Sophie, okay, that's good. Again, bit of a mix. How interesting. All right. My impression is in Australia, average is probably 2 to 3 chairs. Some people have got bigger, some have got smaller. Okie dokie. Well, that's a bit about you guys. Now, a bit about me. Look, I've worked with dentists almost exclusively for about 15 years now with my business Dental Growth Solutions and more recently Dental Stars. And we're, one of the most trusted growth specialists around, as you can see, multi-award winning. Our expertise historically has been about filling your books with new patients. These days, we're just interested in growing the practice revenue. And as you can see, lots of awards there. So hopefully that just gives you a bit of a sense. I've got a bit of a sense of who you are. You've got a bit of a sense of who I am. All right, something I'm calling growth wars. Now, some of you have seen this data before, but it's important for context. On the left, we have Australia. On the right, we have dentists. And I can tell you that pretty consistently in Australia, the number of practicing dentists grows about 2.5 times faster than it does the population. Now, I'm just remembering from the chat, who was it who was in Gympie? Did see that one there. That was Gina. Okay, Gina's, and some of you have told me the whole state, so I can't sort of refine the message. There are some parts, like if you're in a regional area, we're in the middle of a road show at the moment, and so you may not be feeling this as intensely in a regional area as you are in the cities. Now, I know Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, like I'm hearing from dentists all the time, because that levels of competition have really grown. But in regional areas, maybe you do, maybe you don't. The one thing that's a bit tricky in regional areas is if the population's not big and you've got a certain amount of dentists, then just one more dentist opening up can make a big difference. And just to sort of give you a big picture, if that image on the left represents the number of dentists practicing in 2013, the number of dentists practicing in 2026, there's an extra 10,000. So what that means is what worked previously is much less likely to work now. There's some changes we need to make. Hence, we're in the middle of the full chairs series. So in most areas, it means fewer new patients. It's just straight maths, The population's grown a little bit, but the number of dentists has grown a lot, which means a big number is being divided by a bigger number, just straight maths. The next part is around patient retention. In 2026 in Australia, I beg your pardon, 2025, that's a record for the most amount of money spent on dental marketing in Australian history, like more now than ever before. And unfortunately, what that can mean for the team is it's just not as fun being at a practice where everything's a bit of a struggle and maybe it feels like the ship is sinking a little bit. And of course, where those numbers are going down, then the revenue and the profitability is not as good, which is, I guess I'm speaking to the owners here, which can result in lifestyle adjustments, something none of us want to do. And ultimately, if you're thinking, oh, but that's fine, I'm going to get a big sale, I'm all hanging out for the golden egg at the end of this. If your revenue and your profitability is going down, it just means that when it comes time to sell, that won't go as well. That's just straight maths. So that's some of the challenges in 2026. But the good news in my experience is most practices are already sitting on the next 20% of growth. Again, I've worked with lots and lots of practices, city, country, big, small, specialist, non-specialist, corporate, non-corporate. And unless your practice is brand new, most practices are sitting on the next 20% of growth. They just haven't identified where. And so that it's not that you need more ideas, it's like, what is it that I need to do next? And that's what we're going to try and unpack today. So let's talk about working harder. And I thought we'd start with some epic fails. Now, I realized when I put this slide together, this is a slide from the movie Titanic. The movie was not an epic fail. Just give me a Y or an N in the chat if you've ever seen the movie Titanic before with Kate Winslet and Leo DiCaprio. Kaz has seen it. Did you like it, Kaz? Aaron has seen it before. What about the rest of it? Just put a yes or a no. Have you seen the movie before? I thought it was a great movie. I really enjoyed it. Okay, looks like most of you have seen it before. Yeah, that's good. Now, I just want to be clear. The movie was not an epic fail. The Titanic, that was an epic fail. So at the time, it was the largest passenger ship in the world, 269 meters. A football field, depending on your preferred code, might be in the order of maybe 100 meters. Maybe if you're in Victoria, I think the MCG is about 150 meters long. This is a big ship. This is sort of 3 football fields. And it took 3,000 workers 2 years to build it, like massive ship. And when the Titanic hit the iceberg, I assume most of you know the story. So basically the owners of the Titanic were a bit excited about it being so big. And just think about the name, Titanic, very, very big. And it was running at 22 knots, which is close to full speed. I think, I'm not an expert in this, but I have a feeling it's 35, 40 kilometers an hour. Like, it's pretty fast for a boat. Well, on the day that the Titanic sank, they were given 6 warnings about icebergs and they ignored them. And so this, unfortunately, it was a tragedy, which is why it's such a great story, but it was an epic fail. What about this one? Kodak. Who remembers Kodak? Just put a yes into the chat. Yeah, I mean, there was a point in time where Kodak was everywhere. We've just had the World Cup soccer, and I was reflecting back on the World Cup soccer back in the late 90s, early 2000s or whatever. Kodak was one of the major sponsors. They were massive. And so Kodak, in the late 80s, 145,000 employees. I'm on a road show. I'm in Port Macquarie. Port Macquarie plus Coffs Harbour wouldn't be 145,000 people. It was a massive organisation. In 1996, back when money was worth a lot more, 16 billion in revenue. I don't even know what, the net, what do they call it, the gross domestic product of Fiji was in 1996. It mightn't have been that much. And this part, of course, is just ironic beyond belief. Kodak invented the digital camera in 1975. Now, I'm sorry, I'm making some assumptions here. I assume most of you know what Kodak was in, but I don't want to make an assumption. So that was film camera. I've got a camera on here. You just press the button, bang, there's the image. But in the bad old days, you had to load a camera up with film, and that's the space that Kodak was in. And Kodak's epic fail was that they said, digital camera, blah, blah, blah. That's just going to eat into our revenue. We don't really need to worry about it. Well, they filed for bankruptcy in 2012. In a relatively short space of time, from 1996, which is their absolute peak, 16 years later, they're gonski. All right, and then the next question is epic fails in dentistry. Those other two are perhaps for our amusement or interest, but epic fails in dentistry. And one of the challenges is, like this image, is what I would call metaphorically that your ladder is up against the wrong wall. which means that whatever path you've set upon, and this is something that I alluded to at the start of this presentation, it's like climbing, working harder, get to the top of the ladder, and then this dentist goes, words to the effect of, oh crap, because the other wall next to him is way high, and by the way, there's a lift. I don't need to climb the ladder. Now, one of the things I wanted to look through the eyes of is a guy called, in fact, let's see, I'm aware some of you were with me last time, because this is from my new book called The Stuck Practice. Anyone remember what the character's name was? And I'll send you a copy of the book. The guy who's on screen, do you know what his name was? Anyone remember? I promise I'll send you a copy of the book. I'll leave it open for just a second. And if you don't know, maybe you can have a guess. It's a guy. All right, I'll give you a hint. His first name starts with A, and it's not Angus. I didn't write a book where Angus was the main character. Well done, Linda. It was Ash. Now, Linda, if you message me, and you can, I think you can select how you message so that only I see it rather than everyone. If you give me your address, we will post you a copy of the book, and I'll sign it and make it out to you personally. So this is Ash. He's the main character. I just wanted to see you didn't read it on the back cover. At least you've got very good eyesight if you did. And in the book, The Stuck Practice, poor old Ash gets stuck. He's got a bit of an epic fail. And what happens is we've got on the left Ash's practice, and then on the right, Mighty Dental opens up. Boo, Mighty Dental. And, you know, back when Ash opened up, like, things were good. He would be booked for weeks and weeks. It would be like opening a dental practice in various parts of regional Australia. But I can tell you, in metropolitan Australia, it's definitely not the case. And so Ash was stuck. And so Ash's, you know, as all good dentists, Ash's first approach was, I know, I'll go do a few more courses to improve my clinical dentistry. But unfortunately for Ash, that didn't help. And for, you know, the dentists that are on the call, that's what your training is. It's like, do clinical dentistry. Maybe I'll figure out a way to go and do more clinical dentistry, but that didn't help. And then the other thing that Ash did is he said, well, I know, I'll just work harder, which is the topic of this webinar. But unfortunately, that didn't work for Ash either. As he said, look, we don't really have the patience. So it's not really helping, but the stereo room looks great. You know, I've tidied everything and polished, etc. So the truth is that working harder is it's just not a great strategy. I'm not saying, I've got nothing against hard work, but the risk is that if you're hoping to get your practice unstuck, to get it growing, working harder is just, it's a really unreliable strategy. Like we saw the dentist who's got their ladder up against the wrong wall. All right, well, let's have a look now at high-performing practice secrets. But before we do that, special thank you to our sponsors, Dental for Web, the team at Centaur, and they've got some updates. Now, we're in August now, and indeed September's coming. So if you are, well, if you're using any practice management system that's not Dental for Web, here's some things that you might find attractive. First is that the Dental for Web appointment book has been modernized, and it's much faster, which is great, and we all like fast, don't we? The other part for me, I'm the dental business guy. Growth is our thing. Then these analytics are really awesome. And so to have these built-in analytics that give you data and visual insights is really helpful, because one of the things that's hard, and I'm speaking particularly to the owners and the practice managers here, is what do I do next? Like, there's so many decisions in business, and getting those analytics can help you understand metaphorically which ladder should I be climbing, which lift should I get into that takes me to the top floor, because otherwise you may have your ladder up against the wrong wall. And then finally, and I think this one's a really interesting one, smart attendance predictions, which is, you know, where they will look for appointments that are at risk. Because the one thing that we all hate is FTAs, don't we? It's like we're all there, we're all ready to go, and then the patient doesn't show up. And so by using a bit of AI, Dental for Web's got that coming, so that you will know, oh, look out for that one, and let's, make arrangements to avoid that. That's the first thing. The second thing is, and this is why I'm in Port Macquarie at the moment, this is tonight, we're in the middle of a roadshow called the Stuck Practice Roadshow. You'll see it's regional Australia. No, Gympie, I'm sorry. But we're in Port Macquarie tonight, Newcastle tomorrow night. I know someone's in Bendigo. So we've got a bunch of regional areas, and the QR code's on the screen there. It's a free, fun night for the whole team. There's one CPD point if you're chasing that. It's the way I would describe it is it's like a mini ADX. We've got a bunch of suppliers coming, food and drinks provided. I'm giving a keynote on the evening, and there's some door prizes and stuff. So if you are in a regional area or you've got access to a regional area, then you're welcome to join us. I hope you can. All right, let's get back into it then. High performing practice secrets. Just want to make sure. It's fine. I've got a note here that says new messages. Linda, make sure you give me your postal address so I can send you the book. All right, high performing practice secrets. Now, this is the third webinar in the series on full chairs, and I've unpacked for you a number of times the big six. And up until now, we focused in the first webinar on attraction and conversion. The second webinar, we looked at patient experience. And today we're going to look at these last three. So this is patient communication, follow-up, culture, and leadership. Now, in the area of patient communication, one thing that's pretty clear is that if we don't do it well, it has a significant impact on your aspirations to grow your practice. And you can be working harder and harder and not seeing the result. We've got two steak and chips there. And as you can see, that patient communication is a bit like that. You may think that you're describing the one on the right, but what the patient is hearing is the one on the left. So I want to give you some things that where things are not going well in patient communication and where things are going well. One of the things, I really hope you're not doing this at your practice, and if you are, then meet with a team and establish a new protocol. Like speaking as if the patient is not in the room. One of the things that's really important in an environment of, record levels of competition is this patient, what it's like for the patient. There are a couple of points to make. The first is, in nature, the most vulnerable position is lying on your back. If you ever see two dogs fighting and then one dog kind of gives up, they lie on their back and they're like, hey, you got me. And that is exactly what your patient's doing when they're in the dental chair, aren't they? And so when you go to a bad practice and you've got two people in the, maybe it's the dentist and assistant, and they're just chatting away about the weekend or whatever. And I'm like, hello, am I in the room? So please avoid doing that. And the second thing is the use of jargon. And I understand that, the dentist, you've been trained in talking about things like caries and bleaching and various other dental terms, but I'm sorry, that is not the language that your patients speak. And is it your job to sort of have them understand you less or more? And I would argue it's about more. So be really careful about using jargon, because that's a communication block. And then the third thing I'd say is about failing to uncover the needs and wants. Now, look, for the dentists in this webinar here are two questions which, if you continue to ask these of all your patients in the next 6 months, you will see a significant uptake in your practice business, particularly if you're doing some of the higher end services. I learned this from a very experienced dentist who was doing, his personal production was over $1 million. And I know for a dentist, a full-time dentist, that's pretty high. So this is what he said. The first question to ask your patients, every single patient, is there anything about your smile you're unhappy with? Now, some people think, oh, that sounds like you're digging for business. Like, just deliver it as a health care professional. Deliver it in a caring manner. Hey, Angus, like, is there anything about your smile you're unhappy with? It's just a caring question. And then the second question is, because some of you, the patient goes, yeah, as a matter of fact, and then some dentists are ready to just kind of vomit all of this information on people. No. You need a second question first. And that second question is, would you like to hear about the options? Now, I can tell you most of your practices have got literally hundreds of thousands of dollars of business that patients would be quite happy to give you, but no one's actually asked. It is inexplicable to me that as a person who drinks a bit of coffee and tea, and I do get staining on my teeth, I've never once been asked about whitening, and I've been to lots of different dentists. And I think what happens is we're so worried about appearing as though we're sort of pushing stuff down people's throats that we just don't ask. But if you deliver it from a point of view, well, who else am I going to get this service from? Like, deliver it from the point of view of care. Is there anything about your smile you're unhappy with? I mean, the truth is, I've got a bunch of crowding here. I've never once been asked about orthodontics. And again, it's just like, is there anything you're not happy about, with your smile? And they say, well, as a matter of fact, I know I've got a bit of crowding here. And then the second question is, well, would you like to hear about the options? Whether you're doing lots of cosmetic stuff or not, like whatever the case is, it's not your job to decide on behalf of the patient kind of the stuff that they should or shouldn't get done. It's your job to uncover what their needs and wants are and let them know about them. Not selling to them, just saying, kind of showing care, because who else are they going to get this stuff from? Now, one thing that's very powerful for patient communication is the words, this means. If you have to go into the sort of clinical side, that's fine. You might say, Angus, we found use this means, and then that's the way to say, what does it mean for the patient? Because the patient doesn't buy, needs in a sense. They're buying their wants. And so you go, hey, Angus, look, we found. Now, what this means is, that it could be more painful, that it could get more serious, that it could get more expensive. And then the patients go, oh, right, okay, yep, okay, you're speaking my language now. So this means is very helpful to patient communication. The other part I'd say is, as they say, the radio station that all of us are tuned into, WIIFM, what's in it for me? And that this means, and just that sort of mindset of, so this is what it means for you, Angus, or what's in it for me? Yeah, because otherwise there is that, I'm in this position in nature, which is a very vulnerable position, and I'm actually subconsciously thinking about my survival, rather than, kind of really listening to what you're saying. But if you can present stuff in terms of what is it for me, what's in it for me, that makes a massive difference. And then thirdly, the other part, and this is not about fear mongering, but it's just being honest. Okay, so look, Angus, this is what we found today. This means, for you, it could be more expensive, it could get more painful, it could get more serious, boost your confidence, whatever the case is. So what happens if we do this? What happens if we don't do this? Like, you may think that this is somehow not your job. And I've got to say, this is, forget about your practice. You're not serving the patient if you don't do this. Don't they deserve to be informed? Don't we, as in the dental industry, stand for better oral health care? And so I just know from speaking to so many dentists, most dentists don't do this. But just these very simple changes, even if you just start saying this means, and what happens if you don't do it? It's not about twisting anybody's arm or manipulating them. It's just helping them to be fully informed. And as consumers, we want them. So that's patient communication. All right, that's good. Keep going. The next one is around follow-up. Now, I've got a question for you. You can type it into the chat if you like. You may be putting you don't know. At your practice, what percentage of patients leave with their next appointment booked? Do you know? If you don't know, just maybe type in don't know. If you do know, can you put the rough percentage, please? Very simple question. If 100 patients come to your practice this week, what percentage of them leave with their next appointment booked? Okay, thank you. Yeah, all right, so we've got a couple of 70s. I know these numbers vary enormously. I've seen practices with less than 50%. I've seen practices with about 95%. And this aspect of follow-up is really important, because if you don't give patients a compelling reason to come back, they may not come back. Now, some people are moving out of area, that's fine. Going overseas, whatever, but for the rest of them, let's get them back. What about this one? The size of your, what I'm calling your uncalled patient recall list. Now, the patient recall list, I mean, every practice has got one, and depending on how long you've been in business and how faithful the team's been, it may be that you are, pretty good in this area. I mean, maybe you've got 500 people on your recall list or something like that. But we've come across practices that have got tens of thousands. I'm not kidding. With my work with Dental Stars, it's one of the things that Dental Stars does. We've got a remote team that will call recall patients and invite them back to the practice. And yes, some of you say, but Angus, we send them a text message or an email, or maybe you send them a postcard. And I'm like, yeah, I know. But if I'm honest, a human-to-human call, in my experience, is the most effective thing. You know, we've had Dental Stars. Our record is booking 20 recall appointments in one day. And as a person who's got a marketing background, I've got a master's degree in marketing. Like, the kind of money you would need to spend on marketing to get those appointments filled would be way, way higher than just to actually have someone get on the phone and invite people back to the practice. There's some things you've got to say. Dental Stars has now done literally hundreds of thousands of calls. We're approaching 500,000 calls. We've learned some ways to ask people, but it's super effective. 30 to 50 extra appointments a month is not uncommon. And yet, if you said, Angus, I'm going to give you some money to do the marketing to generate 30 to 50 extra appointments a month, depending on where you are, we could be talking 5 or 10 grand. So yeah. All right, and then the third one about follow-up is the current value of incomplete treatment on your books. Now, I know from Centaur data that the average practice, if you've been there for a while, is in the order of $500,000 to $1 million of incomplete treatment on your books. Same deal, have a human being calling the practice, calling the patients. And in many cases, they've either forgotten or they've sort of mentally gone, oh, yeah, no, I will do that. I'll get around to that. And then they just a polite call inviting them back to the practice. You know, we've had one of the Dental Stars repeatedly book $30,000 incomplete treatments where they call them up and they go, yeah, I know I needed to do that. All right, let's get that booked in. Like, it can be incredible return on your time doing that. And then finally, culture and leadership. Now, you know, if I can be honest with you, with these grey hairs here, I'm a bit of a straight shooter, you know. The older I get, the less appetite I've got for sort of fluffing around. So I'm just going to speak to you honestly with the intention of helping you, not criticizing you. I would say the number one problem I see with culture and leadership in the dental industry is what I call abdication, where the practice owner goes, oh, Angus, gosh, like, shoot me now. I don't want to do this. I don't want to set the vision. I don't want to steer the ship. I just want to be chief clinician. Like, if you are trying to grow your practice and you've got that approach, it's very hard to get everybody on board like the girls in this image here. Abdication is not a strategy for growing your practice. The next thing I talk about is, I've said recognizing behavior that demonstrates values. Like, by that I mean, we've got our values for our practice. Just, by the way, put a Y or an N into the chat if you've got values at your practice. Well done, Sophie. Go to the top of the class. No, oh, okay, this is great. Now, come on, there must be some of you that don't have them that don't want to put an N. I'm impressed that you do. Come on, you others. I'm sure there's a bunch of you that don't have them. It's okay. I mean, let's, we all got to start somewhere, right? All right. Well, it looks like the people who have them have said, yes, we do. We're champions. And the people who don't have gone, nah, not answering that question. One of the things you want to be doing is going, okay, we've got this value. Do we actually recognize? Do we reward? Do we say, well done, Mary? One of our company values is growth or care or, whatever it is. And we noticed this week you did. In my team, literally every week, we vote on our 5 values in terms of whether we've been living them or not. It's a really good litmus test for knowing how the team's going. And then the third one, if abdication is problem number 1, I would say problem number 2 is managing underperformance. Now, I'm just going to make an assessment. By the virtue of the fact that you're here and you're on this call, there's a bunch of you that are probably top performers, because that's the sort of thing that top performers do. The people, in some cases, the people that really need to hear this stuff, they're the ones that are not here. I've seen it time and time again. The fastest way I know for the owners or the practice managers on this call, the fastest way I know to demotivate top performers is to allow underperformance to go unchecked. I'm going to say that again. The fastest way to kill the motivation of your top performers is to allow people to underperform and get away with it. And it's not as though you've got to have this big kind of argument and fight. It's just a supervisor to an employee conversation. Thank you, Sophie. It's bloody true. I mean, I've seen it so many times. And, when I was a manager, I'm a manager now. I've got a lot of people working for me. But, in the early days, I was, it's a bit awkward and I don't want to say anything. And then I started to realize it's not just that you're letting that person perform at a 6 out of 10 when really I should be getting let's say an 8 out of 10 for them. It's the negative impact on all the other people. And it's a flipping train wreck. Because the top people go, well, why should I continue to work hard and be a top performer when this other individual's not being addressed? And all I'll say to you is it doesn't need to be a big argument. You just pull them aside and say, hey, this is, here's your job description. Here are the standards, here's our values, whatever it is. I just noticed that I'm getting this from you and I really need to get that from you. Why don't you tell me what's going on? Just have a conversation. But often we're a bit scared to do that. So anyway, that's some stuff around culture and leadership. And if you're not doing these things, unfortunately, you're going to get what is happening in the image here, whereas this guy's all like, oh, practice growth, team goals. And the team's like, nah, stuff ya. Either I don't trust you, I don't believe, I'm not bought in, whatever the case may be. All right, so that's some high-performing practice secrets. I didn't say this stuff was always easy, but it is important. Now, I wanted to talk to you finally as we getting towards the end of the presentation about an easier way. And one of the things I've noticed from being in this game for rather a long time is, certainly in my background when we were just doing marketing for practices, that we would do the same marketing and yet different practices would get different outcomes. And I could never get my head around this. How come I'm doing literally identical marketing for 2 different practices and yet one's getting a very different outcome from the other? And as I alluded to at the start of this presentation, it's not that you don't have growth within your practice. You do. It's just there's some things that are not working. And per the heading of this webinar, it's not about working harder. Now, we've gone through the big 6 here. There were circles before. I've turned them into rectangles purely to get them on the page. And this is kind of a thermometer. Remember, it's sort of cool down the bottom blue. But what can happen is practices, who knows, maybe they go to a session like this and the owner goes, right, it's time to, let's get growing. Let's, really do some stuff. I know. I'm going to tip a bunch of money into patient attraction, sort of turn up the volume, turn up the heat. It's a thermometer, if you remember, it gets redder up the top and blue down the bottom. The problem with that is the big 6 must work together, which means if you tip a whole bunch of money into patient attraction, this is what can happen. As I alluded to, I think in the last webinar, it's like, I spent all this money going, come to our practice, we're amazing. And then as we've discovered, and I've seen these survey results again and again and again, almost half of practice don't answer their phone. Like, no matter what you do in patient attraction, if the conversion part's not working, it's just not going to happen. Similarly, if you've got feral Cheryl answering the phone, then the patient attraction can disappear very quickly. My point is simply this: these things must work together. If you want to grow your practice, you cannot just tip petrol onto one of these and think that that'll be fine, because these things must work together. On the other hand, and I'm just going to give you some examples of clients that we've worked with, and we managed to focus on a few things that were maybe not where they quite needed to be. This was Dr. Brian Chen. As he said, they've grown 30% in the last year because we realized this is where we needed to be tipping the petrol. Dr. Johan Thomas, multiple practices, since we started helping them, grown by almost 46% in less than 2 years. Like, this sort of growth is possible, but the question is, where are you tipping the petrol? Where is the part of the thing that's not working? Dr. Jeff Hall, an orthodontist in Melbourne, and as he said, it's honestly the best money I've ever spent. It's all about return on investment. This is the best return on investment I've ever done. As you can see, the different areas: patient communication, follow-up, leadership, whatever the case may be. And so one of the things that we've introduced in response to this is something called 10 in 6. And the idea is, rather than just tipping petrol on, for example, marketing, instead, the way that we work with practice now, if you qualify, is we will guarantee the boost in income for the practice. Because, a lot of people have said to me over the years, I tried marketing, it didn't work. And as I've said in an earlier slide, like, we've done at times identical marketing with two different practices. One's got a great result, one's got a crappy result, and because of other parts of the big six. And so now it's like, no, we don't want to work that way. Like, if practices are interested in growing, then we will guarantee that income boost, whether it's over a 6-month period, we've got another product that's over a 12-month period. And it begs the question, well, how do you do that? And the way that we do that is focusing on the big six together. Now, obviously, we need some marketing to be boosting the patient attraction. The consulting is going to help these ones that I mentioned down the bottom here: the patient communication, the follow-up, the culture, and the leadership. And then off-site help, so that the phone's always being answered. Maybe you've got someone calling the recalls or the incomplete treatment to get them back to the practice. And in our experience, it's getting these things working together that's the one that generates the results. And that's how you get this kind of 30% growth in 1 year, almost 46% in less than 2 years. I hope this makes sense. So the way that it works, and just to be super clear, I'm not asking you to buy anything. I'm just explaining how this works. And if it's interesting to you, then you can get in touch. What we do is, we've got at the moment a founding partner program. There's a particular pricing because we're looking for, and we want to get some testimonials and case studies. And where you qualify, we will say, all right, here's the amount of growth we're going to generate over either a 6 or a 12-month period. And if we don't achieve that, we'll work for free. So we're very, very confident we'll achieve it. As I said, why are we doing this? Because we want some case studies and testimonials so that other practices will say, yep, that sounds like something we like. And the bottom line is, it's a partnership. We know we need to work together. We know we need to be attacking the big six, figuring out which wall your ladder's got to be against, so that when you get to the top of the ladder, you go, yay, we climbed the right wall. Now, from your point of view, our focus at the moment is on 2 surgery practices. So I'm not saying we won't do bigger, but 2 or 3 is fine. If, for example, you've got a 2 surgery practice and you're only, let's say, 1.5 chairs full. If you had only 1 chair full, we probably wouldn't work with you. If the other chair was 0.95, we probably wouldn't work with you. But if you're somewhere where that second chair is empty for several days a week, that's what we're looking for. Because I can tell you as the owner, and again, I'm speaking to the owners on the call here, your rent or your mortgage payment is exactly the same, whether that chair is completely full or half full. You know, the rent, the mortgage, the insurance, the electricity, lots of your fixed costs don't change. The next part is you need an associate who can do more hours, because our job would be to fill, you know, continue to fill that extra chair. Well, you've got to have someone who's able to deliver the clinical dentistry. Usually the owners are full. It's the associate that needs capacity to do that. The practice would need to be at minimum 700,000 a year. You know, we're working with practices that are doing a fair bit more than that. And you're looking for a genuine growth partner where we work together. Our goals are aligned. We're both shooting in the same direction. So the way that it works is if you're interested, you can express an interest. It's literally just to go, that sounds interesting. I'm happy to chat more about that. I like the idea of guaranteed growth, rather than spending money with no guarantee if I'm going to get a return. You'd get on a Zoom call with me, and then if you look like you're a good match, we just get you to fill in a quick survey, and then off we go. So that's the program, and the QR code there is just simply so you can express your interest. We call it 10 in 6, minimum 10% growth in 6 months. Depending on the practice, the numbers might be higher than that. But I just know, as someone who's been in this game for a long time, I've had many practices say to me, Angus, I've spent money on marketing and I didn't get a return. And I have to say to you, that's probably because the big 6 wasn't working at your practice, and we need to get that stuff fixed. So we'd much rather be involved in a holistic approach, you know, and we do most of the work, but you've got to do some stuff as well. Anyway, that's the QR code for that one. Now, finally, what about Ash? Does he get unstuck? And if so, how does he get unstuck? And the answer is read the book. Fortunately, I'm going to make it easy for you. This is the book, The Stuck Practice. And so I'm going to offer you an ethical bribe. If you feel that I've done a reasonable job either today or in some of the other webinars you've listened to providing helpful education, then that QR code there goes to a chance for you to leave a review. And you can just say, you know, appreciated Angus's insights or whatever it is that you want to say. And then you send us an email and say, hey, I left you a review. I will post you a free copy of that the book. Now, I don't know whether you're more of a reader or a listener. We do have an audio version as well, but that's the email. So you leave us a review, send us an email and say, hey, can I get a book, please? And either we'll post it to you, or if it's the audio version, then we'll send that through to you. So that's my kind of ethical bribe to you to say, you know, appreciate your time, and then you'll find out what happened. All right, let's summarize. So a bit of background, lots of competition, record levels, in fact, particularly in metropolitan areas. We know that working harder in and of itself is not a great strategy. As I keep saying, we need to make sure we've got the ladder up against the right wall. And as we've seen, tipping petrol onto one of the big 6 may not be enough, because if the others are not working, it just doesn't work. On the other hand, and we unpacked in this webinar the last 3 of the big 6, looking at, I'm just trying to remember, patient communications, follow-up, and leadership. And I've given you some of the, if I can say this, some of the most painfully obvious ones there. And then finally shown you an easier way. If you're like, look, we're interested in growing our practice. It's been a bit of a struggle. Who knows? Maybe things have been going backwards a little bit. I like the sound of a guaranteed growth. Then maybe you look at the easier way. But importantly, my friends, it's about taking action now. So let's see if we achieve this. Understand why working harder isn't enough. I think we've got a pretty good coverage of that. Discover what high-performing practices do differently. I'm not saying that stuff's easy, but it is simple. And then finally, creating a roadmap for a minimum 10% growth in the next 6 months. Working harder won't grow your practice. Here's what will. And we've got the 2 QR codes there. If you're happy to leave us a review and then send us an email and say, I left your review. I'll post you a copy, or you can get an audio version. If you're interested in discussing this kind of minimum 10% growth in 6 months, then scan that QR code and let's chat. All righty. Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time. Now, look, I'm going to take some questions for a minute. We've got a few minutes to go. Just any questions before we finish up? All right, somebody's asked about the book. So, yeah, the book's called The Stuck Practice. There it is there. Look, it's not a particularly fat book. It'd probably take you, depending on how fast you read, maybe 90 minutes to read it. It's a business fable. What does that mean? The whole book is just a story. It's a story about Ash, and hopefully I wrote the book some time ago, but finally getting it published now, I sort of feel for him. I want him to win, and Ash has some tough things that happen to him. It doesn't go easy for him. And then at the end of the book, the last chapter is the business principle. So just read, like you could literally read this to your kids as a bedtime story, and then in the last chapter. But if you want to get a free copy of it, just scan the QR code. That will take you to where you can leave us a review, whether you talk about the webinar or you say, something more general about me, and then email us and we will send that to you. All right, let's see what other questions have come through. All right, someone's asking about the guarantee, the growth thing. Where's that? Yeah, so the way that it works is we will look at it depends what your revenue is. We agree on a baseline together. Some practices, the revenue is very lumpy. It's kind of up, down, up, down, up, down. Others is much more steady. We'll look at your historic data, and then we'll just agree, well, this is what we would expect in a 6-month period, and then we guarantee a minimum 10% on top of that. And if we don't achieve that, then we will work for free for you until we do. And believe me, this thing comprises, we do a bunch of marketing for you, but we're also meeting with you every month, and at the beginning, even more often than that, to just go through the big 6 and help you with that stuff. Look, all of us work better with a coach. I mean, if you think about elite performers in any field, and I mean top of their game in business, in finance, in sports, whatever the case is, all of us work better with a coach. And having someone to kind of blow off some steam with, I mean, I've had the same coach for 15 years now. Sometimes I get on the call with him and I spend the first 10 minutes just venting about stuff in business. It's actually very therapeutic. And then the third part is you'll have an off-site person who will make sure, for example, that we're answering the phone. Maybe you've got like someone calling up to find out about ortho, $6,000-$8,000. Nobody answers the phone. Gonski. Who knows? Maybe you do implants or all on X. I mean, maybe it's just, a bunch of crowns. Like, it can be big dollars slipping through the cracks simply because you're not answering the phone. As I showed you in that data, it's like just over half. These were calls during regular business hours, on a regular day of the week, and just over half of practice actually just even answer their phone. So yes, we find we've got to do all these things together. They work together. They generate an outcome that you get a guarantee. That makes sense. All right, let's see what else. All right, that's great. Well, I hope that's helpful. Let me just leave those QR codes up, and then I think we are done. If there's any more questions, there it is. If you're interested in a free copy of the book, scan the one on the left. If you're interested in discussing how to get guaranteed growth, scan the one on the right. I think we're all good to go. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate your time. Go well, get growing. See you next time. Thanks, guys.